How you mix bass guitar can be the difference between an amateur sounding mix and a pro sounding mix. So today I'm going to give you 5 steps to mixing bass guitar like a pro. We're going to start as always by showing you the bass guitar inside the finished mix here for this song, and then I'll solo it up and give you an A-B of the processing here as well, so you can hear the before and after. You can hear our raw bass and the mixed bass as well before we dive into all of the processing. So here's our bass inside the finished mix.
Holding on to hope is where I'm coming from. And when the breeze rolls in, you will come. There's no place.
You can hear before the processing, our bass is pretty weak sounding. It's pretty dull sounding. It doesn't have a lot of energy to it. It's very inconsistent, and our bottom end isn't doing what it needs to compete and really lift up this track. So let me take off all of the plugins here now, and we're going to break down the processing step by step for this track. So I have a DI and an amp sound for this song, and for this track, they're actually the same, but I still do the normal processing I would do if I had an amp and a DI. So what we're doing here on the DI track here, so here's just our DI. You can hear on the DI we're using just the bottom end. This is something I like to call the frequency split trick, is where we're splitting the frequency range on the bass guitar to bottom end and top end. This gives you more control over the most important frequency range on your bass guitar, which is the bottom end. So I'm making the DI track here everything below 180 hertz, just the bottom end, so low passing everything above 180. You could pull in a high pass filter here as well if you want some extra control on the bottom end, but I don't feel like I need that at this point. So the first step here is we're using the frequency split trick to roll off top end on our DI, and then if we come over here to our amp track, we are doing the opposite. So I'm rolling off everything below 180 hertz and just using the top end and the mid range on this bass guitar. So here's our bass amp. This is just the top end. And then that's both of them together there. So here's our DI, everything below 180 hertz. And then here is our bass amp track, everything above 180 hertz. And I like to use a pretty steep slope as well on the high pass and the low pass filter to reduce any kind of phase issues from anything at the crossover point. So you can see on our bottom end here, it slopes off pretty fast. We're done by about 300 hertz here. And then on our opposite filter here on the high pass, it slopes off pretty fast. You can see we're done by about 100 hertz. So there's maybe 100 hertz gap there in the crossover, but it's still coming down pretty fast, 24 dB per octave. That's our first step, and you can hear it already gives us a ton more control, a ton more flexibility on our bass guitar to process it the way we want to get it to fit inside the track. Now, step number 2 is we want to get rid of any frequencies that we don't need or that we don't want to be fighting in our bass guitar. And on this particular bass guitar, there were 2 frequencies that I wanted to target, and that's the sub area and then the lower mid-range here. Let's take a look at this high-pass filter first here. 12 dB per octave slope, and I've got it positioned at about 70 hertz. For me, I like to hear mostly like 80 hertz on bass guitar. That's the fundamental I like to emphasize on bass guitar and lock in with the kick drum to get that nice weight and bottom end bloom. So everything below that, I want to gently roll off here and get more control out of the sub area. So when we boost it later on in the chain, it's not inconsistent and it's not uneven. There's not frequencies jumping up all over the place here. So take a listen. High pass filter first here, 12 dB per octave slope at about 70 hertz. Take a listen to the control and the cleanup it does on our bass guitar. This move already starts to hold our bass guitar more in one place, a central frequency range, so there's not things jumping up in the mid-range, and then suddenly things are jumping up in the bottom end, and it kind of feels like your bass guitar is shifting all over the frequency range. We don't want that. We want to pin it down, so we need to start by cleaning up and tightening up the bottom end and sub area. Now, on this particular bass guitar, because of where he's playing and the notes he's playing, there was a buildup going on around 200 hertz here. So I have about a 5 dB cut, negative 5.28 dB at 200 hertz. Take a listen to how this is going to clean up our low mids here. These are kind of the nosy frequencies. It's almost an octave up from the fundamental we're going to emphasize. So we want to take care of that so the bass guitar doesn't get too muddy sounding here. So take a listen. 5 dB cut at 200 hertz. You can hear we're removing a part of the sound, a part of the frequency range that isn't contributing the energy that we want to emphasize inside the track, which is mainly the bottom end and this kind of 80 hertz fundamental area on our bass guitar. That's step 2. Now, before we get to these other 2 moves here on our EQ, we're going to jump forward to step 3. Step 3 is using normal style compression here. I like to use this 1176 style compressor, but any compressor will do. Fast attack, fast release here. On the 1176, I've got it set at about 10 o'clock here or so 0.55 milliseconds. Really fast in general, but kind of a medium slow attack for this unit. And then 50 millisecond release, the fastest release on this unit. 4:1 ratio. I'm going to compress the bass guitar more like a vocal than an actual bass guitar. I want to get it sitting in one place before we start messing with specifically the top end or boosting the bottom end. So this is going to be our big control element, and the benefit of using something like this, an 1176 style compressor, is it's going to give us some extra energy and grit and character on the bass as well. So take a listen here. I'll start with it out and then I'll kick the compressor in. You can see how much gain reduction we're doing, and you can hear how it shapes the bass tonally as well as volume-wise. We're doing about 7 dB reduction on the bass guitar. Really feels like we're squeezing it, but I love pushing into this FET comp here in PreSonus because it starts to break up a little bit, starts to distort, and that helps you hear more of the top end on the bass guitar, especially as we move into step 4 here. So that's step 3, little review so far. Our first step was we're using the frequency split trick on our bass guitar to isolate the bottom end on the DI and then the top end on the amp track. Step number 2 was we're using our EQ on the bus, so processing both the DI and the amp here now, rolling off any excess sub area and getting rid of anything that's muddy in the low mids. And step 3 was we're using our compressor to control the volume as well as shape the tone a little bit on our bass guitar. Just want to hold it in one place. Now, step 4 is where we're going to emphasize and bring up some top end, some fret noise, some finger noise, so you can hear and discern the notes the bass guitar is playing inside the track. The first frequency I like to reach for is anywhere between 500 and 1K. We're at about almost exactly 700 hertz here, doing a 4 dB boost. This is going to bring up some mid-range bite and some mid-range growl on the bass. That's going to help it slot really nicely with our electrics and our keys and everything else going on inside the track. So take a listen here, and I'll click this boost in, and then I'll also add in this top end boost here, which is up at 4K. It's about 12.5 dB, huge boost here, but it's going to give us a lot of air and a lot of openness on the top end of the bass guitar. That's going to help you hear more of the notes he's playing, and also give you some sliding on the fret, some fret noise, which sounds really nice inside the track overall. Those two moves drastically wake up our bass guitar tone, and it's going to help you hear the bass inside the track. You could do this other ways on this step here. If you wanted to add like a distortion track on your bass guitar to get more top end bite out of it and blend that in underneath, you could do that as well. Sometimes I just prefer cranking up a ton of top end on the bass guitar to get that fret noise, that pick noise, that finger noise, whatever you need to hear the bass guitar notes inside the track. So that's step 4. Step 5 is controlling and boosting bottom end. Now you could do this all just with the multiband. I like to split it between the multiband and then a boost in the bottom end with EQ, just for some extra control here. Now on the multiband, what we're doing is we're only looking at 180 hertz and below. So I've got this 20-to-1 ratio, fastest attack, fastest release. You can see I am boosting a little bit here, but that's just to make up for the compression we're going to do. So let me solo just the bottom end here. You can see the amount of compression we're doing on the bottom end. The goal here is to pin the bottom end in one place. So no matter where he's moving on the neck, no matter where we park the volume fader, we're always going to have complete control over our bottom end, and it's going to be consistent. It seems like a lot of work on the bottom end, but you can hear as I A-B the multiband, how much more consistent and even the bass guitar sounds. It also appears smoother because we're evening out the frequency range here. A little added bonus just here on the multiband. This is something that's specific to this track, is I did pull in the top end of the multiband, 20-to-1 ratio, same thing, fast attack, fast release, just to control some of those more attack-driven notes when he slides up high, but this isn't always something I do. Same principle as the bottom end, just applying it to the top end with the multiband. But we're looking at the bottom end here, controlling it, and once we control it, then, only then, at the end of the chain is where I'm boosting bottom end. So I've got an 8 dB boost at 80 hertz. There's a little cut here again at 200, just controlling that low mid area a little more. But our main thing here, big 8 dB boost at 80 hertz. Take a listen to how this changes our bass and finishes off, solidifies our tone. Now it's feeling like a bass guitar. Now it's feeling like a pro bass mix here. We've got all that bottom end, all that bloom in the sub area. It feels big, feels powerful. Let's throw it back inside the entire mix here, and I'll A-B our bass chain. You can hear the before and after inside the mix, and I'll solo it up one more time as well.
Holding on to hope is where I'm coming from. And when the breeze rolls in, you will come. There's no place to run, but love's not sure to follow. 'Cause we may lay these traps and leave our minds to walk.
5 steps for mixing bass guitar like a pro here. The first thing we're doing is applying the frequency split trick, isolating the bottom end on the DI track, everything below 180, isolating the top end on the amp track, everything above 180 hertz. Then on the sub here, on both together, the DI and the amp, step number 2 is we're getting rid of anything we don't need in the bottom end and in the low mids, controlling our bass guitar sound. Step number 3, we're using compression to control volume, get a little bit more consistency out of the bass guitar. Before we get to our last 2 steps here, step 4, which is boosting top end so we can hear the bass, it cuts through in the mix. And step 5 is controlling bottom end with the multiband and then boosting it at the very, very end of the chain with EQ to get a big and powerful sounding bass guitar mix. I hope that was helpful. If you are looking to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety and you really want to start to hone your workflow as an audio engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's just a simple PDF guide that will walk you through the entire mixing process step by step to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without any more of the hassle and without any more of the guesswork. Like I said, completely free to download, and you can get access to that by clicking the link below in the video description. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.